final section here, we have our questions answers. So this is questions from YouTube subscribers or from different platforms. We wanted to get all these questions down. So let's cover those first.
Okay, let's talk to the first one. It's got 2 questions. Would you do seller financing for a higher priced lot at wholesale or only after a quiet title? The answer to that question really is going to depend on the individual property.
Yeah, like what the numbers look like. You certainly could. You could do a seller financing deal, if it made sense to you to do it. There's nothing wrong with seller financing deals. You don't necessarily have to take properties through, a quiet title in order to make a good deal.
Yeah. Now, when you're doing something like seller financing, you can ask a higher price than you could if it's a cash type deal. And really, it's going to be based a little bit on what you want to do. When it comes to if we're going to offer, if we're going to go through quiet title or we're not going to go quiet title, if we have somebody that's interested in seller financing, we're really not married to either direction. We're open to either direction. And really, if you're open to either direction and you already have a buyer, that's probably going to work out best for you in the long run as well.
Yeah. I mean, finding the buyer is ultimately our main objective, and so we never want to overlook that. So let's move on to the second part of the question here. Also, found a nice flat 5-acre residential plot, but from the top view GIS parcel map, it looks like both neighbors built their driveways on this lot. Is that a big red flag? Do you do surveys for wholesale or even after a quiet title to sell?
Let's go ahead and answer the first part of that question. As far as that 5-acre residential lot, the neighbors' properties may have an easement that allows them to access the part of the property, or they may not. And that's really where, if we're interested, we're going to look into the deed and see, is there an easement that allows the neighbor to put it on there, or are they encroaching on the property?
Yeah, that's really the only way that you're going to know, whether they're just doing that on their own and their driveway is just over too far, or whether they actually have a legal right, to do that because it's, that's how it's listed in the title.
Yeah. Now, would it keep us from buying the property? No. If it still had use and if it still had value, we're talking about 5 acres, so it's not like there's not enough room to be able to somebody to be able to build a property on there. But it is something we're going to look into. And we're going to check the deed to see if there's any type of easements that allow it. That will at least tell us. And then once you purchase the property, you can decide what you want to do. You can contact those property owners and let them know they're encroaching on your property. But to find out if they really are, you're probably going to need to get a survey done. Mm-hmm. Because, as far as the overhead map, that's a good indication, but that's not an exact 100% proof that's where the property lines are. It's very possible that they may have their driveways may be on their own property. That would be determined through the survey, and if it's worth doing, that's going to really kind of depend on how much money you probably have into the property.
Yeah. Okay, next question here is, I've come across some tax sale lists that don't include, and by the way, this is from Alex, I've come across some tax sale lists that don't include the minimum bid, in West Virginia specifically. How do we go about finding the minimum bid amount?
Yeah, that's a good question, and we've actually seen this in West Virginia ourselves, Alex. When it comes to this, you're not going to see this all the time, and really, there's only 2 things we can do. The first thing we can do is we can look up the tax collector information on their website and see what back taxes or how much taxes are on the records there.
Yeah, the tax history will at least tell us, what's been paid, what hasn't been paid, so we can know about what the total tax bill is at, because whether it opens up at that amount or whether they have people bid and then they make you pay that amount in addition to it, either way, it's something you're going to need to know.
Yeah, well, and even that, we're just getting an idea. That's not going to be 100% science that's going to be what it is, because there may be fees involved. The second thing that we would do is we would just contact the county and ask them. We may need to send them an email, give them a call, and say, hey, I'm interested in this tax sale list. I see there's no opening bid amount. And it may be for a specific reason. In fact, we've seen this before, and the reason there's no minimum bid amount is because they stocked the auction all at $100. And they're just getting rid of the properties, or they're starting at some minimum bid, and it's a highest win. And so, if you do come across that, especially in a place like West Virginia where I have seen that before, in fact, it's something I've commonly seen, you're probably going to need to do one of those two things to see how much that is going to open up that.
Yeah. All right, next question here from Ralph. What is the difference between a normal tax deed auction and an upset tax deed auction? Thank you very much for the help.
Great question, Ralph. When it comes to the upset auction, and really, if we're talking about an upset auction, this is only going to apply to Pennsylvania. And Pennsylvania is a little bit different than any other state. They have first what's called an upset auction, an upset tax deed auction. Now, what that is that's an auction where they are auctioning off the property, but they have not gone through a judicial foreclosure, which means that anything like a lien, judgments, mortgages, anything like that is going to stick to the property. So that's what the upset sell is. If you're buying that property, you're buying it with liens, judgments, mortgages attached. It means you got to research that before you buy it and see what's attached to the property and make sure it's still going to be worth buying. Then what happens from there is they have a judicial sale.
Yeah, which the judicial sale is the sale that happens post foreclosure. After it's been through a judicial foreclosure and those things have been wiped out. So you do get that benefit of getting the liens wiped out through the foreclosure process. But it's also a different sale. It's a full sale later. I'm sure there are still good deals to be found in the upset sale. But yeah, very much a specific term that the Pennsylvania state law basically uses and kind of set up. So there's a few other places around the country that have things kind of like a bit up, but for the most part though it's just Pennsylvania.
Yeah, well, they're going to have that upset sale in the beginning where all of the liens are going to be attached. They're going to go through a judicial sale where it's a judicial foreclosure, eliminates any liens, judgments, mortgages, and then they're going to have what's called a repository sale, which is their terminology for their over-the-counters. So if the property doesn't sell in the upset sale, doesn't sell in the judicial sale, then it'll be put into a repository, or sometimes they'll go ahead and sell those property in an auction setting, or you can purchase them over the counter.
Yeah, and all those terms are also unique just to Pennsylvania.
Yeah. So. Another question from Maria: what could happen if there's a mortgage on a tax deed lot in Florida? When it comes to Florida, regardless if it's a lot, a home, anything like that, if there's a mortgage on the property, it is not going to be attached to the property after it's gone through that judicial foreclosure.
Yeah, it goes back to what we were talking about with tax liens being first position liens. That really gives them the power to extinguish or it gives them precedence over any other kind of lien, including something like a mortgage. A mortgage is really just another property owner from the perspective of the state. There are different owners there. The mortgage is one of them, and that's why the mortgage will be one of the parties that will receive foreclosure notices. When they go out, is because the county's trying to get them to pay. But ultimately, if they don't pay, then the same thing will happen to them, that happens to any other property owner. They're going to lose their property rights to that property, if the foreclosure is completed and they haven't paid.
Yeah, so really, that mortgage is no longer, the property is no longer going to be collateral for the mortgage.
Yeah.
The mortgage is still going to exist. They could still try to go after that previous property owner.
Yeah, there's still a loan there between the two parties, but yeah, the property will no longer be collateral for it.
Yeah, looks like we have one last question from Chris. What about mineral rights in a foreclosure or tax foreclosure? It's a good question. When it comes to something like mineral rights, it's really going to be state-specific. Because in some states, those mineral rights will attach to the property as part of the real property. In other states, those mineral rights can be owned by, a different individual or a different party. So you may own the land and somebody else owns those individual mineral rights. In fact, in some states, we've actually seen them sell mineral rights in a number of different states where they're actually selling those mineral rights in a tax sale foreclosure.
Yeah, we have seen mineral rights selling in tax sales before.
not common, but we'll probably. I think I'm not 100% sure, but I know Pennsylvania does. I think I've seen Nevada before.
Yeah. Now it could be possible to to profit from that, but
Colorado too.
You would need to have some kind of knowledge in and because we personally don't have any experience with evaluating the value of mineral rights.
Yeah, I can think of I think Colorado. There's a few different states where occasionally you'll see them come up because those mineral rights, depending on the state, could be taxed as real property. So if they're not paying the property taxes on those mineral rights, then just like a piece of land that they owned or a home that they own, the county will go ahead and issue a lien on the property and sell those liens. So there are a number of different states that happens, but it's really going to be kind of a state-specific question, depending on those individual states.
Yeah. So you're generally going to avoid mineral rights, at least if you're looking at them like liens, you could potentially buy. And you probably won't deal with them too much outside of that.
Yeah, well, and whether the property you buy has mineral rights or doesn't will really kind of depend on the state.